A yeoman, ʻjoʊmən, was a member of a social class in late medieval to early modern England. In early recorded uses, a yeoman was an attendant in a noble household, hence titles such as Yeoman of the Chamber, Yeoman of the Crown, Yeoman Usher, King's Yeoman, ʻjoʊmən Warders, Yeoman of the Guard. The later sense of yeoman as a commoner who cultivates his own land is recorded from the 15th century, in military context. Yeoman was the rank of the third order of fighting men, below knights and squires, but above knaves. A specialized meaning in naval terminology, petty officer in charge of supplies, arose in the 1660s. The term is first recorded c. 1300. Its etymology is unclear. It may be a contraction of Old English iung man, meaning a young man, but there are alternative suggestions, such as derivation from an otherwise unattested *ʻjoʊmən meaning villager, rustic. The canon's Yeoman's prologue and tale appears in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written between 1387 and 1400. History. In the late 14th to 18th centuries, ʻjoʊmən were farmers who owned land. Their wealth and the size of their land holding varied. Sir Anthony Richard Wagner, Garter, principal king of arms, wrote that a yeoman would not normally have less than 100 acres, and in social status is one step down from the landed gentry, but above, say, a husbandman. Often it was hard to distinguish minor landed gentry from the wealthier yeoman, and wealthier husbandmen from the poorer yeoman. The concise Oxford Dictionary states that a yeoman was a person qualified by possessing land of 40 annual feudal value, and who can serve on juries and vote for a knight of the shire. He is sometimes described as a small landowner, a farmer of the middle classes. The term had a military sense as in the yeomanry cavalry of the late 18th century and imperial yeomanry of the late 1890s. The ʻjoʊmən archer was unique to England and Wales, though Kentish Weald and Cheshire archers were noted for their skills. It appears that the bulk of the yeomanry was from the English and Welsh marchers. The original yeomen of the Guard chartered in 1485 were most likely of Brittonic descent, including Welshmen and Bretons. They were established by King Henry VII, himself a Briton who was exiled in Brittany during the Wars of the Roses. He recruited his forces mostly from Wales and the West Midlands of England on his journey to victory at Bosworth Field. Yeomen were often constables of their parish, and sometimes chief constables of the district, shire or hundred. Many yeomen held the positions of bailiffs for the high sheriff or for the shire or hundred. Other civic duties would include church warden, bridge warden, and other warden duties. It was also common for a yeoman to be an overseer for his parish. Yeoman, whether working for a lord, king, shire, knight, district or parish, served in localized or municipal police forces raised by or led by the landed gentry. Some of these roles, in particular those of constable and bailiff, were carried down through families. Yeomen often filled ranging, roaming, surveying, and policing roles. In Chaucer's Friar's Tale, a yeoman who is a bailiff of the forest who tricks the summoner turns out to be the devil ready to grant wishes already made. The earlier class of franklins were similar to yeomen, wealthy peasant landowners, freeholders or village officials. They were typically village leaders, constables or mayors. Franklin militias were similar to later yeomanries. Yeomen took over those roles in the 14th century as many of them became leaders, constables, sheriffs, justices of the peace, mayors and significant leaders of their country districts. It was too much, for even valets known as ʻjoʊmən archers were forbidden to be returned to Parliament, indicating they even held power at a level never before held by the upper class of commoners. In districts remoter from landed gentry and burgesses, ʻjoʊmən held more official power. This is attested in statutes of the reign of Henry VIII indicating yeomen along with knights and squires as leaders for certain purposes. The yeoman also comprised a military class or status. By contrast, in contemporary feudal continental Europe, the divide between commoners and gentry was far wider. Though a middle class existed, it was less esteemed than the yeomen of England of that time. United States. In the United States, yeomen were identified in the 18th and 19th centuries as non-slaveholding, small landowning, family farmers. In southern areas where land was poor, like East Tennessee, the landowning yeomen were typically subsistence farmers, but some managed to grow some crops for market. Whether they engaged in subsistence or commercial agriculture, they controlled far more modest landholdings than those of the planters, typically in the range of 50 to 200 acres. In the North, practically all the farms were operated by yeoman farmers as family farms. Thomas Jefferson was a leading advocate of the yeoman, arguing that the independent farmers formed the basis of Republican values. Indeed, Jeffersonian democracy as a political force was largely built around the yeoman. After the Civil War, organizations of farmers, especially the Grange, formed to organize and enhance the status of the yeoman farmers. U.S. Navy. In the U.S. Navy, U.S. Coast Guard, a yeoman performs administrative and clerical work. They deal with protocol, naval instructions, enlisted evaluations, commissioned officer fitness reports, naval messages, visitors, telephone calls and mail. They organize files and operate office equipment and order and distribute office supplies. They write and type business and social letters, notices, directives, forms and reports.